Good morning, everyone. Welcome, board members and guests, to the Wednesday, October 26th, 2022 meeting of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, and the Placer County Local Transportation Authority. We welcome the public to in-person participation. In addition, remote teleconferencing participation is available to board members and the public pursuant to the provisions of Government Code Section 54953E due to the COVID-19 state emergency proclamation and recommendations for social distancing. Okay, so let's see, public participation. There will be multiple opportunities throughout this meeting for public comment. After I open an item for public comment, those joining us by webinar can signal they wish to speak by clicking the raise hand button on the middle bottom of the Zoom webinar window. If you are joining over the phone, you can press *9. PCTPA staff will call out individuals one by one who have indicated they wish to speak. For those joining us in person, you are welcome to come to the podium. We ask that anyone making a public comment state their name and city of residence. You will then have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, and we will notify you when your 3 minutes are up. If you experience technical difficulties and are unable to provide public comment during this meeting, please email your comment to Solvi Sable at ssabol@pctpa.net. Board action. Because this meeting is being conducted via teleconferencing, all votes will be roll call votes. Board members, we ask that you state your name prior to making a motion or seconding a motion for the record. Once an item has been moved and seconded, I will request the clerk call the roll to vote. Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. A lot of words. Would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Bruce, yes, please, that would be great.
Ready?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. Okay. So, Sylvia, will you take roll for us, please?
Yes. Broadway.
Here.
Clark Kretz.
Here.
Holmes.
Here.
Howdeschelt.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Wilkins.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, okay. AB 361, remote teleconferencing. Mike, are you going to present that?
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Board of Directors. As we've had in previous meetings, we have a request for adoption of Resolution 22-34 to approve findings to hold meetings by remote teleconferencing and declaring its intent to continue remote teleconferencing meetings pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E due to the Governor's state of emergency proclamation and state regulations related to physical distancing. At this point in time, the governor's emergency order is still in effect until February of 2022 or 2023, excuse me. And so we recommend that the board continue to adopt this resolution, which allows our next meeting to be held remotely. And that, again, will continue until such time as the declaration has ended. There is some new regulations that have come into effect due to the action of the legislature, which allows teleconferencing after the emergency has ceased for a limited basis, and that explanation is in the staff report. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we recommend that you move the recommended action.
Okay, do I hear a motion would you like to discuss it first?
I move approval. I'll second.
Okay. Sophie, roll call then.
Mara's still not on. Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Clark Kretz.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeschelt.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, okay. So the next up is approval of the action minutes from September 28th, 2022. Any discussion on those minutes or corrections?
I have none.
I'll move approval of the action minutes from September 28th.
Haudashelt seconds.
Okay.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Clark Kretz. Okay. Holmes,
Yes.
Haudashelt,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so the next section is public comment, and
Agenda review.
I'm sorry, did I skip, I did skip agenda review, sorry about that. All right, and with agenda review, Ken would like us to pull item G1. No, that's not the agenda review, I'm sorry, that's consent. Does everybody see the agenda? What do you think, any comments or corrections, or,
None from me.
I have none.
okay,
And staff has no recommended changes as well.
okay. I hear you. Do we need to approve the agenda? No, just a review, okay. Okay, now it's time for public comment. I don't have my little spiel on public comment. Did I say enough about public comment? Well, we have public comment first, so is there anyone out there that would like to come to the podium and comment from the public, or anyone online? No one online. Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda have been requested to remove item G1 by member Ken Broadway. Would anybody else like to pull anything from the consent agenda?
I have none.
Okay. Bruce? Good?
No.
Okay, well, let's go ahead then and approve the rest of the consent agenda, and we'll come back to
Haudashelt
item
moves.
one.
You want to open it for public comment if there's any public comment?
Yes, is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Anyone else? Okay,
Haudashelt moves the consent agenda minus item G1.
I'll second the consent for Placer County Transportation Planning you received.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Clark Kretz. Holmes,
Yes.
Haudashelt,
Yes.
Jones,
yes?
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, Ken, I'm gonna let you take it away.
All right, thank you. I had just asked that this item be pulled from consent so that I could make a few comments. We also are honored today to have a few members of the California Highway Patrol with us, and I wanted to give them an opportunity to speak to the value of our freeway service patrol, which we've had a memorandum of understanding in place since 2005. This is a service that helps ensure the safety of individuals who travel on our highways, not only those who are involved in accidents, but those that continue in transit, and also our public safety personnel who keep us safe. And it extends the ability for us to respond quickly and to have a service in place so that if someone breaks down or if there's an accident, we have a vehicle or vehicles available quickly. This service is actually supervised on a daily basis by our California Highway Patrol, which we're very appreciative of all of their efforts to do so. We ran into a challenge we've had between the financing of the service in prior years, as well as the ability for staffing to be found. This was brought to our staff's attention that there were some challenges relative to continuing the service. Staff worked quickly and diligently to find a solution so that we could ensure we maintain the service. And I just wanted to recognize staff and also the members of our California Highway Patrol for all that they do. I don't want to leave Caltrans out. They are also a party to this. I'll get a phone call later, I'm sure, if I don't mention them. So I did want to mention that they are also involved in this, but I did want to thank staff for working so quickly to ensure that we could maintain this service. And I would also, if you would allow me, like to provide a member of the Highway Patrol to just speak quickly about the service and what this does for them as well, and again, helping keep us safe when we are on our highways. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you all for having us, and thank you, Solvi, for inviting us here. So, yes, myself and my partner, Jeff Hand, we oversee the Valley Division Freeway Service Patrol Program. So we do have quite a few counties, Placer being one, El Dorado, Sacramento, and Yolo, and as well as San Joaquin. So we do have a large area. So just to touch base on the CHP assistance standpoint, it does help out officers to handle higher priority calls. So for example, like you said, when you get a disabled vehicle out there, instead of us going, we can just start your freeway service patrol. So, and we want to thank you for bringing the service level back up to where it needs to be, because we have, as Sylvie knows, we've been running a little short here lately with your trucks up here. So that just gives us more assistance out there. And then we work in tandem with the Freeway Service Patrol. Like you said, it crashes. They help us out, remove, something blocking the freeway or a disabled vehicle, whether it's, broken tire or out of gas, whatever the case may be. They're a big help to the Highway Patrol, and we've approached many boards on the assistance that they provide us out there on the freeways. And you guys see it. I don't know if you guys see the survey returns from the motoring public as well. Hey, we get them all the time. He was like an angel that fell out of the sky. This is the best way of spending taxpayer dollars that I've ever seen. So people don't really know that it's out there. So they do appreciate the Freeway Service Patrol in more ways than one out here. So we just like to thank you, and we'd like to also thank Solvay for getting this up and running such quick amount of time here. We had, I don't know how much time we had since we were kind of notified that the service was going to drop. So we appreciate working with Solvay, and Solvay and Dave, when Dave was doing it too, we appreciate the the assistance we've had from both them, and our counterparts, and Caltrans, of course, working with you guys to get the Freeway Service Patrol back to where it needs to be. So we appreciate that. So thank you all for having us. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to.
If I may, Chair. What hours is the Freeway Service Patrol on?
So for your area up here, it's 6:30 to 10 in the morning.
Okay.
And then in the afternoons, it's 2:30 to 6:30. Plus you also have Sunday service. I think do we currently have that? Are we bringing that back? Okay, we don't currently have that. I didn't know if it was going to come with the new contract or not. So you do have Monday through Friday, 6:30 to 10, and then 2:30 to 6:30 in the afternoons. So it's usually what we try and do is we monitor traffic patterns, and that way we have your schedules to mirror when there's the highest amount of traffic out there on the freeways.
All right,
So
very
we
good.
use the Caltrans. They have sensors out there counting cars. We try and adjust your schedules to where it needs to be, and that was the schedule that was
All right, thank you
best
very much, appreciate it.
providing the service. Yeah.
Thank you very
Any
much.
other questions?
I do, actually.
Good, yes.
Sure.
So Highway 65 not covered going forward. It is covered?
It is. That was so you have a current contractor, Extreme Towing.
Uh-huh.
So currently you have a tow truck on the 80 and the 65. So the original contract was for 2 tow trucks and a service truck. So we dropped the service truck, and now we just have the 2 tow trucks.
Okay.
So the current contractor was going to drop the 65, and then because he just didn't have employees to work that area up there. So we contacted one of our backup prior to, and then he had a backup truck and a driver to put up into service. So you're not going to lack any service whatsoever. So it's just going to be a seamless thing. Once November 1st comes around, you're just going to have one contractor over here on 80 and one contractor on the 65. There's going to be no lack of service anywhere.
Question for Mike. Does Highway 65 actually include the on-ramp westbound to 80? Or is that?
Yes, it does, yeah.
And I can answer that question too. So in
Yeah.
our SOP, basically the way it's worded is for the beats, you handle all transition roads.
Okay.
So
That's
he's
great
going
to know.
to so transition roads being transition to 80, on-ramps, off-ramps, underpasses, overpasses. So that's the way our SOP.
Using that on a regular basis. Those are
Correct.
some
So
of the
he's- so
most
you're-
challenging
so you're-
merges there are, right?
Oh, yeah. That's where I would say 80% of our incidents are in that 80-65 interchange right there. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, we
All right.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you
coming.
for having us.
All right,
Appreciate it.
great, okay. Solby, help me out here on H, do we need to,
Actually, I will, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, I will move approval of consent item 1.
oh, that's right, yes, okay, second? Okay, Solby, roll call.
I got Sandy on yet? Nope. Okay, Broadway.
Yes.
Burris. Burris.
Trying to find her unmute.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm having some really bad connection issues this morning, so if you guys have to skip my vote anytime, feel free to circle back to me.
Okay. Clark Kretz.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so my question is, do we have to approve H, the consent calendar, or is that?
Let's see, we got,
Move approval of the consent calendar for the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency.
Okay, roll call again.
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Clark Kretz.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, let's move on to item I, 9 a.m. public hearing, 2022 unmet transit needs assessment and public engagement efforts. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, members of the board. Mike Costa, Senior Transportation Planner. This item, before we open the public hearing, I wanted to give a little bit of background on what the unmet transit needs assessment is for members of the public and for the board. As the Regional Transportation Planning Agency for Placer County, we administer at PCTPA what's called the Transportation Development Act, or TDA. Under the TDA, there are two sources of funding that our region uses. One is the local transportation funds, which are generated from a quarter-cent general sales tax that comes into California and then is distributed to the regions by population. And the other funding source is the State Transit Assistance Funds, or STA, which comes in through the statewide diesel fuel tax. And then that's distributed again to our jurisdictions based on population and operational expenses. The STA funds are used only for public transit purposes. They can be used for transit operations, capital, and those types of needs. However, the local transportation funds, or LTF, can be used for other purposes such as streets and roads. However, they are intended primarily for transit purposes, and in order to use those funds for streets and roads, that's why we have to conduct what's called the unmet transit needs assessment process each year. That process then determines if there's any unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet, and if there are, we have to meet those needs before we allocate any LTF towards other purposes like streets and roads. So what is an unmet transit need and what is reasonable to meet? Unmet transit needs, essentially, in summary, are needs that are not being met by existing transit services. And that's not to say that operational needs are one thing, like, for instance, schedule changes or maybe bus stops located in different positions of routes. Those are not unmet transit needs. But if there's an area of a community that has no service, that could potentially be an unmet transit need. And then another unmet transit need is a service that's required under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So if there's a need for ADA service somewhere, that could potentially also be considered an unmet transit need. However, our board has also adopted definitions and criteria for the second component of evaluating unmet transit needs, which is the reasonable to meet criteria that you see on the slide before you. What staff has to do is anytime we receive a potential unmet transit need, we work with our transit operators, and we also work with our Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, or SSTAC, as we like to call it, to evaluate those unmet transit needs based on the criteria of reasonable to meet that you see on the slide before you. In summary, that criteria alludes to unmet transit needs having to be, if we're going to address them, they have to be a feasible service, and they have to be something that's not expending more funds than are available, and something that's broadly supported both by the public and also in our planning processes that we've laid out at PCTPA. In the past, we've had some unmet transit needs that have been identified. In this slide, you see actually some going back to 2015, the most recent one being an ADA service need that was a cross-jurisdictional service needed between Rockland and Loomis. Rather than stopping at the border, an unmet transit need was actually to allow ADA passengers to cross Rockland-Loomis and be able to use that ADA service without having to transfer buses. So that was an unmet transit need that we met prior to LTF going to other purposes in Loomis or Rockland. What we do every year, it typically starts around the September-October timeframe in terms of how we assess our unmet transit needs. There is a public survey that is live right now. That survey is available at www.pctpa.net/UTN. You can access the survey to ask some general questions about transit services, and it also then identifies opportunities for you or members of the public to express where their unmet transit needs are. We're conducting that outreach through November 18th. We're also visiting our local jurisdictions to bring awareness about this process. So we're visiting the Board of Supervisors meeting in November, and also all of our local jurisdictions starting this week and into November. And then once we collect all the comments that we receive, we'll evaluate them based on the criteria that I mentioned before, and then bring to this board the findings of whether or not there's any unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet in February for adoption. How can you provide public comments? As I mentioned, the survey is the best tool that we recommend members of the public to provide their unmet transit need comments. They can contact me with my information up there. They can give us a call. And if they need additional translation services, we are required under our Title VI obligations to translate important documents into Spanish and Tagalog. So we do have this survey available in Spanish and Tagalog as well for members that may need it. So with that, I'm available to answer any questions about the unmet transit needs process. We are required under the Transportation Development Act to conduct at least one public hearing, which is what staff recommends the board do today. But if you have any questions about this assessment process, please let me know. Otherwise, staff recommends that the board opens up the public hearing. And for members of the public, we recommend that if they are providing comments on unmet transit needs, that they're very specific about where those needs are and what time of day roughly that they're looking at for those unmet transit needs, so we can work with that. Thank you.
Okay, well, first I think we'll go to the board if you have questions.
Not a
Mr.
question,
Costa?
just a comment. Well, yeah, I guess kind of a question. Since Lee Bastian is no longer with us, I'm sure if he was here, he'd want to know what's going on with the unmet transit needs to Sheridan.
That's a very good question. So the Sheridan area is definitely a rural area of our county that is, I would say, underserved by public transit. Of course, under our criteria, we also have the reasonable to meet factor and component that is something that's hard to bring public transit out to Sheridan for the number of people that would be riding it on a consistent basis. It's hard to justify a public transit service out there for that. However, we are still continuing at the staff level to look at other opportunities in the future. I know our regional transportation planning process is considering how we serve the rural areas with all of our transportation services and systems, and so that process may be looking at potential alternative forms of transportation that could be offered in rural areas, but we don't have that information yet. But in terms of public transit, the cost is very expensive to extend public services into Sheridan, so we'll be continuing to look at that.
Other questions? Okay, then we'll open it up to the public hearing. Would anybody like to come forward and share with us?
Doesn't look like anyone out there, but we do have someone up here, so.
Okay, good.
Tink Miller, you're free to speak. Tink Miller, you're free to speak.
Okay. Is there a place for someone to ask questions on that, the Q&A portion of that? Okay, there's one comment. Hello, just wondering if there is any plan to improve the dial-a-ride service in Granite Bay. The service to go to the mall directly is no longer available. Thank you. That, I'm not sure who that's from, but
I can't speak to that specifically, however, it's something we can note and evaluate as part of this process.
okay, let's do that. Any chance Tink Miller could put your question on the Q&A? Oh, I'm so sorry. There we go. Is that, nope. Okay, well, that's unfortunate.
Just recommend that she go ahead and send it to Mike Costa. Any questions?
Okay. Tink Miller, could you send your email? Mike, would you give your email one more time so that you can be contacted directly?
Sure. Tink, if you could please contact me via my email at mcosta, M-C-O-S-T-A, @pctpa.net. Thank you.
Slower, M like in Michael.
M is in Michael, C-O-S-T-A, @pctpa.net. And she has my email as well.
Oh, good. So you communicate with this person. Good. Anyone else on there? Okay. All right, well, we will close the public hearing. Does anyone else have any other comments, questions? No? Okay. Looks like no other comments. Okay, let's move on to J. We have a presentation, SACOG's Blueprint and Relationship to PCTPA's 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, RTP efforts. So we have Corey Peterson and Mike Costa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm going to go ahead and introduce this item before I introduce our guest speaker from SACOG. In summary, many of you are aware of our regional transportation planning efforts that we kickstarted here at PCTPA back in February, and we gave a presentation to this board about what the regional transportation plan process was. One of the things I'd like to emphasize is that this process is very well coordinated with our partners at the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, or SACOG, because of the many overlapping similarities and processes that we have to do both at our local level here in Placer County and as well as at the 6-county region that SACOG is responsible for as the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So our RTPs and our MTPs, as their process is called, or blueprint as their update is called for this round, is very similar in that it is a long-range planning process that looks at our transportation policies and objectives and our investment projects that we have in this region. It also projects the population, housing, and job forecasts that we look at both at this region and at the 6-county level. We work with SACOG on that projection. They take the lead, but then we use that for our RTP process. And then it also is financially constrained in terms of our project list or our transportation investments in our RTP are fiscally constrained to the forecasted revenues that we work with SACOG to develop the federal, local, and state revenues that would come into our transportation projects. And so we work very closely with them because of our projects being constrained among those same limitations that SACOG's projects are. And in essence, too, our projects in our RTP are then taken and put into the MTP-SCS, which is SACOG's blueprint plan. The biggest differences, though, however, is that the SACOG process does look at, of course, the 6-county region versus our local 1 county. And then they also consider land use as part of scenario development to look at how land use and transportation investments together lead to our greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. That's one of their requirements for their SCS component. And so that is where kind of the biggest difference is in our processes, is that their long-range plan considers land use scenarios as part of their transportation investments, whereas ours looks more solely at the regional transportation plan and just the transportation investments. So with that, I'd like to introduce James Corliss, the Executive Director of SACOG, to be able to explain a little more about the blueprint process moving forward and their plans.
Welcome, James.
Okay, great. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Fantastic. Well, great to be with you this morning. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I've got to be in some in-person meetings starting in about half an hour in downtown Sacramento. Otherwise, I would be there. Again, appreciate the introduction, and I also appreciate the excellent job that your staff did talking about the similarities and also the differences between the PCTPA plan for Placer County and our regional 6-county plan for transportation. But the bottom line is, and I want to assure everybody of this, they have to work hand in hand. The PCTPA long-range plan, as it has done before, has to fit into the larger 6-county plan. There's lots of reasons for that, as I think the staff had showed in the last slide there. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few slides. I really wanted to give you an update on our 6-county plan this morning, tell you a little bit about what we're anticipating in that plan, and I want to cover a couple of more sort of granular initiatives that we're working on, many of them hand in hand with PCTPA and all the jurisdictions that are members of PCTPA as well. So next slide. So I know you all know this. Many of you sit on the SACOG board, or you have sat on the SACOG board, or you're the alternates to the SACOG board. But one thing that's unique about our 6-county Council of Governments is that every single jurisdiction is on our board of directors. We actually have every jurisdiction coming around a table twice a month, once in committees and once in the full board. Every single jurisdiction, from Colfax and Ileton and Live Oak to the city of Sacramento and Placer County and El Dorado County, everyone. And that's unusual, and I think part of what makes our regional approach pretty special. It isn't often that an area this big covered by a regional agency like ours has every single local government at the table on a consistent basis. Next slide. So as Mike said, we branded our update to our long-range plan as Blueprint. We've done that very intentionally because about 20 years ago, this region was doing a voluntary bottom-up effort around growth and infrastructure and the future of the region in transportation called Blueprint. And we were engaging as a region in that because the future projections for the region did not look good. We were not on the right path. We were on a path to more traffic, worse air quality, gridlock, worse access to jobs. And so the region kind of came together and made this, which we're still very proud of, very voluntary bottom-up commitment to a strategic plan for how the region should grow. And as Mike Costa was saying earlier, one of the things we start with in every long-range plan update is looking at land use and housing and jobs and how we're growing as a region and trying to match the infrastructure and transportation projects to those growth patterns and to the phasing of growth and transportation. So next slide. So again, as Mike said, in terms of similarities here and how this fits together with your plan at PCTPA, we have to be, as on the icons on the right are suggesting, we have to have a strategic plan that is fiscally constrained. That is really, really important. We cannot have either a 1-county, Placer County PCTPA plan or a 6-county metropolitan transportation plan that is simply a wish list or a stapling exercise of everybody's project. So one of the things, I know many of you have been through this exercise before, you'll note very early on as we get into some drafts and alternative scenarios next year in 2023, not every project will show up in a long-range plan. Not every future growth and development will show up in a long-range plan because we have to be constrained by federal law. And frankly, and I don't think I have to tell any of you this sitting on a transportation planning agency board, we are fighting hard with your agency for more revenues, but we will never have enough money to fix everything. So we have to be strategic, we have to be cost effective, we've got to be lean in solving our problems, and we have to prioritize. So we know as a 6-county agency that projects like the 8065 interchange and the 3rd track to Roseville are really, really high on your list and our list. That's because we work together and we have plans that integrate and interact. But this is not a planning exercise where you will see every single project, and we will do our best to be transparent about that and have a big public conversation going into 2023 about that. So next slide. So here's my analysis. Actually, I think if you go to the next slide, this should show some sort of there you go. All right, so I like anecdotes, and the best I can do on these anecdotes, again, for many of you who are veterans and have been around these long-range plans, this may all make sense. If you had a house and you had a growing family and you said to yourselves, boy, we need a bit more room because our family's growing, right? We've got to do a renovation. We got to add some room on. We want to put another bedroom on, or we want a bigger kitchen, and we'd like a family room. Maybe we'd like a sun porch. But at the same time, or I guess if you go to the next slide, maybe we want a second story. There's the extra bedroom, right? But at the same time, our roof is leaking and our foundation needs to be fixed. And we don't have the budget to do it all. And anecdotally, I hope you're following along, that's essentially what we have when we do these long-range plans. That's what we mean by fiscally constrained, is that we have to make some tough choices. We've got to decide our trade-offs between fixing our crumbling infrastructure and investing in new capacity. We have to decide trade-offs between our transit service and our local road repair, as you were just talking about unmet transit needs. So those are the very real trade-offs that we are faced every time we do this plan update. Next slide. So we are starting this plan update, and our board of directors met earlier this year and basically started with a framework of what we call the triple bottom line. And by this, we mean equity, economy, and environment. So equity means basically engaging disadvantaged communities, lower income communities, communities of color, rural communities that have been cut off from opportunity and jobs. We know we have an incredibly diverse region. Equity basically means really trying to pay attention to those needs and those disparities that exist even in transportation and accessibility by race, ethnicity, by income, by geography, by urban, rural. Not everybody starts the same starting line, and so that is one of the many ways in which you all, as elected officials and PCTPA, as our partner, is so critical, because you know your county best. But we have to pay attention to those differentiate, those divides, those disparities, and really make sure that we are providing growth, housing, and transportation right that addresses very unique and diverse needs throughout the population in the 6 counties. Understanding every community is very different, every county is different. Economy, pretty obvious, but our economic prosperity and making sure that we are working with our economic partners like the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, the Metro Chamber, to make sure that we are investing in projects that are actually truly strengthening our future economy and the bets that we're making regionally on our economic sectors, and retaining talent and attracting talent to this region. And finally, our environment, clean air, clean water, reducing air pollution, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the overarching framework as we enter our next plan. Next slide, please. So obviously, and you obviously sit around the table at PCTPA doing the very important work around transportation, and just some images I know you all know very well. But again, I talked a little bit about the balance, right, and the different kinds of investments that we need to make across the 6 counties, helping you all in Placer County, everything from the 8065 interchange to our passenger rail network, which is expanding rapidly, to our trail network, to potholes that are everywhere, and even things like electric vehicle charging. There's never been more federal funding and state funding available for things like passenger rail, electric vehicle charging. But how do we actually integrate those into projects? How do we think holistically? How do we develop a long-range plan that really calls these things out, both at PCTPA level and the regional level, so that it gives us a leg up to be more competitive for many of these state and federal grants in transportation? Next slide. So I wanted just to hit on the importance of, as we develop these plans and going back to that blueprint from 2002 and 03 and 04, and what we intend to do this time next year. And Mike Lucan and I have had these conversations pretty extensively, and he's reminded me of all the great work that went on 20 years ago. And if you can just go to the next slide. So when we start with land use and growth, we do that because really how we develop and how we grow underpins right? The transportation needs that we have. And while that's obviously all about all of your local jurisdictions in terms of general plans and zoning, it's the private sector in terms of growth and development and people coming in and building housing and jobs. How we grow, the pace we grow, where we grow rapidly, where we grow thoughtfully and strategically, and how we phase that with transportation is essential. And that's the underpinning of our 6-county plan. We're going to be doing 3 different scenarios or pathways as we look at this next year. And we, again, start with a couple of different scenarios, and these kind of dark blue and light blue really show you some scenarios that we are working with all of your local governments, working with many people, doing a lot of work to set this up right now, and really asking the questions, what if really a lot of our growth in the next 20, 25 years is greenfield growth? What if we turn that dial up and we can't actually reinvest and revitalize our aging commercial corridors and our downtowns and our existing urbanized footprint because of lots of reasons and barriers? What if it was more greenfield? What if it was more of a balance, which is frankly what our current plan calls for, so sort of pathway 2. And then finally, what if it was actually more about growing up but not out, and revitalizing and really putting more investment, again, in a lot of our vacant lands, our aging strip malls, our infill, even suburban areas that need to be infilled. So we're going to be doing these pathways and look at what we might get with some different kinds of transportation investments in terms of outcomes, right? What do these kinds of growth patterns mean as we looked at this 20 years ago in the blueprint for air quality, for traffic congestion, for people's ability to get to where they need to go? So those pathways will be public and will be a big part of what we work on and release next year in partnership with PCTPA and El Dorado County Transportation Commission, and really try to get a good public dialogue going about the future of the region and whether these different kinds of growth pathways, if you will, what they really mean for the future livability of the region. So next slide. So obviously this all will be done in close partnership with PCTPA, but in particular, we want to make sure we're arm in arm on engagement. We, as well as I know your staff at PCTPA, don't want to and don't like holding a public hearing in the traditional way and asking people to come to us. We want to go out to where people are. I know PCTPA does this, and I have to credit your staff. The Placer Gateway Plan, I think, was a great example of how very innovative, creative ways of engaging the public actually led to that really important plan for the Placer Gateway, and frankly led to us being able to win some state funding for that project. We want to do more of those kinds of things as we get into engagement next year. Again, arm in arm with PCTPA and really in partnership with all of you at the local level and meeting your constituents where they are, not necessarily in a boardroom, but actually out in the places where people gather, whether it's farmers markets or events. We'd love to get your insights on that and your help. So next slide. So timing, we're setting up again. This is we're actually going out to as many city councils and board of supervisors as we can get to. I think we've done about 2/3 now to set up what will be a very busy year in 2023, where we do a lot of this engagement. We talk about the pathways, and we will be developing a preferred pathway. Not a pathway that is one of those 3 options I just told you, but really building something and developing our final preferred pathway that basically takes elements probably of all 3, depending on our feedback and our engagement next year. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit now. I'm gonna run through these and skip through some of them in the interest of time. But we're doing a lot of work around equity and racial equity and disparities. And I've mentioned this earlier. I know this is a very hard topic sometimes to talk about, but disparities by race and ethnicity, disparities by income, the differential between what low-income communities and rural low-income communities can actually get to versus other folks, we have to pay strong attention to. And we know, I'll just speak to our agency at SACOG, we need to do better. We need to do better at engaging communities. We would only do this with cities and counties and PCTPA, but we have stood up a $3 million community engagement program so that we can really try to get some of the voices shaping transportation infrastructure projects, frankly, who haven't been at the table for very long. But we know when we talk about equity and racial equity, we lead with race, ethnicity, and disparities. But we also, as I mentioned, want to understand income disparities, age, and the senior growing senior population, especially in Placer and El Dorado and more rural areas, disabilities, right, and all of the differentials and disparities that exist in the region, because transportation can be a bridge and should be a bridge rather than a barrier. So next slide. Our Green Means Go program, we're really excited about. I mentioned growth and those scenarios and those pathways. How do we get a good balance between revitalizing our existing developed footprint and even getting some of our aging commercial corridors to pop back to life? We're really proud of this effort. We've got $38 million from the state of California. 26 of the 28 cities and counties around the region have designated green zones for more economic revitalization and infill. So this is about more housing options, and it is in places that have existing infrastructure but need upgrades. And we know people drive less. So from a air quality and climate greenhouse gas reduction perspective, if we get more people living in these and refresh these aging commercial corridors, people will drive less. They may still drive, but they'll drive a lot less. So that's good for our housing crisis, and it's good for our environmental air quality and climate crisis. Next slide. Actually, let's go to the next slide, and I want to just wrap up here. And I want to wrap up on this slide because as some of you I know are engaging with your congressional delegation, as you always do, and we always should do, and think about going back to DC, this is a great effort that we've been very closely partnered with PCTPA on and our partners, and that we'll be chairing again next year in 2023. This is our mega region working group, because as much as our region is really economically a 6-county region, it's probably more a 16-county or even 20-county region, right? I may not have to describe to you how we're growing closer to and more integrated with Reno and Northern Nevada and down to the Bay Area. We now have commute traffic that spans this entire, these corridors here, right? So we are working with our sister agencies in the Bay Area, Metropolitan Transportation Commission, the Northern San Joaquin Valley, San Joaquin COG. We've identified a dozen projects, high priority mega region projects that knit the region together. In the case of Placer and the things that matter, I think, to Placer, I-80 and the third track to Roseville, making sure that we get good frequent Amtrak service, not just between Roseville and Sacramento, between Placer County, the Sacramento region, the Bay Area, and the South Bay and Silicon Valley. That's a game changer. We're also getting ACE Rail and San Joaquin Rail coming up to the Sacramento region over the next 18 months. And we want to actually explore pushing that service further up to Marysville, Yuba City, and Chico. And we're really excited even by the potential, as I know your agency has been a lead on, at looking at, can we get the Capital Corridor to make a future connection up over the hill to Truckee and to Reno? Because again, those are those corridors that really are the economic corridors of the future. So with that, I'm gonna end it there in the interest of time. We've got a great trails plan. We've got a great youth leadership academy, but I'll hold it there. We really appreciate our partnership with PCTPA, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, board members, questions, comments? Okay, you'd like to open up to the public? Online, okay, well, thank you, James. That was a great presentation. I guess you said it all. Nobody has any questions or comments?
No, you said it well, a great presentation.
Yeah, thank you, James. Hey, James, just one comment as we continue through this process, and there's a lot of discussions relative to PCTPA and our engagement with SACOG, and you used a great analogy of the home and an expansion of the home with the roof. My only concern is if I live on a street with 6 homes, such as 6 counties, I hope that our not only expansion, but our roof can be fixed and those money's not sent to the other homes in the neighborhood. So I want to ensure that we protect our funding and that we ensure that we focus on our projects as well.
And I certainly appreciate that and know what you're referencing. And I want to assure you that we are working closely with PCTPA and El Dorado County Transportation Commission. I also wouldn't be doing my job if I told you I think we can guarantee everybody everything that happened in the past, right? We are only going to be successful as a region if we think as a region, and you have my commitment, our agency's commitment to make sure Placer County gets the investment it needs, and PCTPA has its rightful role in being engaged in that, right? So that is really important to us. I hope you understand that. That's certainly a high priority for me. But we also have to understand and work through some of these requirements now that are coming down federally and from the, and we're doing that. We're doing that. So I'm very optimistic about our ability to work through this, and thanks for your question.
Yep. Thank you, James.
Okay, well, I guess then, thank you, James. I think we're ready to move on then to item K, Placer Sacramento Action Plan. David?
Good morning, members of the board. Today we're asking you to adopt Resolution 2235, accepting the Placer Sacramento Action Plan, and determine that that plan is statutorily exempt from further environmental review under CEQA, and also asking you as a second action to authorize the executive director to submit in partnership with Caltrans and the Sacramento Area Council of Governments a grant application for the 2022 Solutions for Congested Corridor Program. With that, the staff report goes through and provides background on the Gateway Plan and the current action plan effort and the upcoming grant application effort. And we have a PowerPoint presentation that will summarize the staff report. I would like to introduce, we have with us today Zach Sevilla with Mark Thomas. Zach is the consultant for the action plan effort, and so we will tag team here on the PowerPoint presentation. And so I'll work through the first 5 slides talking about background, and then Zach will take it over in terms of discussing the current planning efforts. So with that, let's proceed.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so the Gateway Plan effort was initiated in 2019. It's a multi-collaborative effort. James Corliss pointed out that the Gateway Plan is an example and involved both Caltrans and SACOG and PCTPA taking the lead. It also included 14 agencies within jurisdictions within the corridor, both Placer and Sacramento County jurisdictions, as well as the Capital Corridor and Sacramento Regional Transit. This corridor is 40 miles in length. It includes major transportation facilities, Interstate 80, State Route 65, Business 80, as well as the Capital Corridor Passenger Rail Project and Sacramento RT's light rail transit line. It's called the Blue Line. And this effort also included community input, and James alluded to that as part of his presentation. We had over 5,000 people that provided input in the Gateway Plan process. So the plan identified over 150 multimodal improvements, costing about $4.1 billion. It's improvements that basically are identified in the SACOG MTP as well as Placer County's RTP, spanned out over a 30-year time period. And one of the biggest issues when you have 150 projects seeking $4.1 billion is which comes first and how to prioritize in terms of project readiness and environmental clearance. So this plan was accepted by this board here back in April of 2020. At that time, you authorized the executive director to submit a grant application for what was then the 2020 Solutions for Congested Corridor Program, and we did so in July. So that effort was successful. We submitted in partnership with Caltrans and SACOG, as well as Sac County, Roseville, Citrus Heights, Regional Transit, 8 projects, and we were successful. We got a grant award in December 2020 for slightly over $67 million. Rather large amount of money and, rather, unprecedented for our region at that point in time. And the collaborative effort continues now with the action plan effort. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zach. And Zach will talk about how we prioritize the remaining 150 projects moving forward in terms of seeking competitive funding opportunities.
Great. Thanks, David. Good morning. I'm glad to be with you this morning. So I do want to just touch a little bit on how we went through that effort. As David mentioned, there was a lot to get through, 150 projects, 4.1 billion, crossing over 14 jurisdictions. So it really was a collaborative effort. It started off in 2018 with the public comments that we received in support of looking at what those priorities would be for our area. In April 2020, the Gateway Plan was completed, and then we moved forward with that next effort of trying to identify a priority for these projects moving forward. So as I mentioned, it was a multi-agency collaboration over the last 2 years to get to where we are today. There were 14 agencies involved, and to help steer this process, we established what was called a strategy team. That was made up of Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, PCTPA, SACOG, Caltrans District 3, and CCJPA, Capital Corridors. In addition to that, our project development team included all of the other member agencies, cities, and counties throughout the region. So through this process, we met every 2 weeks. There was a lot of work that went into this process to get to where we are today. We established with the team a set of required criteria that would be included in these projects. A number of items were the status of the environmental clearance, the sizing of the funding request, as David alluded to, 4.1 billion has to be broken up into some discrete amounts that could be competitive for funding applications. We were looking at vehicle miles traveled. That's the new focus in the state of California. Benefits to disadvantaged communities in our region, and then also safety benefits along this corridor. In addition to required criteria, we also looked at what are those desirable items? What is that desirable characteristic that we're looking for as well? So a number of these were, what is the status of the project readiness? How far along is it in its development process? Does this support the state housing guidelines and where the state is going with pro-housing? Is this a local agency priority? Are there operational benefits that these projects provide? Are there modal benefits? Is this something that is adding additional types of services between areas that are not there today? And then does this support access to jobs and other key destinations? So with that as the guiding parameters for this study, we separated these projects into 3 primary tiers. Tier 1 is those projects that significantly align with those desired and required criteria. The Tier 2 projects were projects that aligned with most of that criteria, but there was some refinement that would be needed on those projects. And then the Tier 3 projects were those projects that still need some more project definition. They may be identified in capital improvement programs, but there still needs to be some definition to really see how it aligns with those programs. So for the Tier 1 projects, what we identified was a series of regional projects, but also we wanted to identify projects that covered all modes of transportation. So shown in the red color, if you can see that on your slide, were like roadway projects. So these include the State Route 51, the Cap City Freeway project, as well as improvements along the Watt Avenue corridor north of I-80 going into Placer County. For bicycle and pedestrian projects, the Auburn Folsom Road project in the city of Auburn, Dry Creek Greenway Phase 2 for the city of Roseville, the Lincoln Boulevard improvements, which pick up and go most of the way through the city of Lincoln. For transit system management, these are projects that look at managing capacity, not necessarily creating additional capacity, but managing capacity in a different way. So this is the I-80 express lanes across the top, the Bell Road I-80 roundabout project in the city of Auburn, and then the Rockland Road I-80 interchange, which I know this board is very familiar with. In addition to that, we also identified a series of transit projects, the Sacramento-Roseville Third Track Phase 1 project, the Sac Valley Station improvements down in the city of Sacramento, And then improvements along North Watt Avenue, there's a proposed BRT line that extends again up into Placer County as well. So these are a map just showing where those projects align in its geography between Sacramento and Placer counties. Again, this is a regional effort looking at balancing mobility through the area. And there was a really good split between Placer County projects and Sacramento County projects. They do work together to provide access throughout the region. And then we wanted to further break it down to show how those projects were identified in terms of priorities locally. So there were a number of what we identified as regional projects. So these would be projects like the State Route 51 improvements, the I-80 express lanes, the Sacramento to Roseville third track, and the North Watt BRT. Those are regional projects because they cross jurisdictions. Local projects were the Auburn Folsom Road improvements, the Lincoln Boulevard improvements, the Bell Road roundabout, and the Rockland Road I-80 interchange. Those are projects within Placer County. And then local projects within Sacramento County were the Watt Avenue corridor and the Sacramento Valley Station improvements. So taking that, the next thing that we did is we worked through additional public outreach on these priority projects to see if there's general support from the community. This has continued over the last year. So we created a series of informational videos. Those are all posted on the more80schoices.com website if you wanted to go take a look at that. And we did receive public comment back on those projects. And where that then led us to was drafting what we are here to talk about today, as well as the next cycle for the SB1 applications. So the SB1 application, we did identify 3 projects that the PCTPA is going to be recommending for an application. And so this was considered in partnership with the overall PDT, with Caltrans, and with all of our member agencies. So the 3 projects, this is going to be a joint nomination with Caltrans, which we do appreciate the support from the state on this. The 3 projects are the Sacramento to Roseville third track, phase 1. So this is the third track extending into the Roseville train station in downtown Roseville. The next phase on this graphic is there's currently, for those that are familiar with Business 80, as you go around underneath the railroad crossings, there's a series of railroad crossings along Business 80 right before you get to the American River Bridge. And this project also includes replacing those bridges as part of the third track project as well. And then also improvements to the Sacramento Valley Station to help provide more access for buses, as well as improvements for CCJPA. So the total cost is $315 million, just over $315 million for those 3 projects. The requested application is $75 million to the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. And just in terms of some things that led the team to identify those projects for nomination is alignment with overall state goals, and those are presented in the guidelines for the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. These projects collectively reduce VMT throughout the region because it does provide for modal shift to other transportation modes. It reduces delay for people traveling through this corridor, lowers greenhouse gas emissions. It does also provide benefits for underserved communities throughout Roseville and Sacramento counties as well. And it received very positive support from the community engagement that we did. So 100% of the people that responded said that these 3 projects would help their commute throughout the region. So that was really positive support that we received through that effort. We do know that the action plan, it's a guiding document. So there were 3 projects that we just talked about, but there's 147 projects remaining in there. And so what we want to do is provide a framework for those projects to be identified for future funding cycles. So just looking at the Tier 1 projects, we wanted to identify a series of funding programs that could be identified for future cycles. And so what we did is we listed every one of the projects that I went over before, and just a number of regional and state and federal programs that could be applied for in future cycles. In addition to that, for the Tier 1 projects, we did the same effort for the Tier 2 projects as well. The action plan document has a similar table for all of the Tier 2 projects. And they provides, again, a framework for PCTPA and the member agencies to use in looking at future projects going beyond this cycle that we're requesting applications for. With that, David, I'll turn it back over to you.
And to close out, at least with the staff and the consultant presentation, we're requesting the board adopt the resolution accepting the action plan and determining that the plan is statutorily exempt under CEQA. And number 2, authorizing the executive director to submit, in partnership with Caltrans and SACOG, a grant application for the Capital Corridor Regional Transit Project. And assuming that grant application is awarded to us by the CTC, then the executive director would execute those documents as required. I would like to close by saying that this project was initiated by a former planner that used to work here, Kathleen Hanley. Those of you on the board may remember. She was the one that sought and prepared the grant application that was submitted to Caltrans under the Sustainable Communities Planning Grant Program. And we were awarded a fairly large grant amount, to fund this particular effort. And she carried this through until she left and went on to Caltrans, with a promotion. And so my role here is kind of coming in terms of baseball terms, as sort of the reliever, as well as the closer. And so I'm asking you to help me close out this project. And with that, I'd be glad to take any questions.
Madam Chairman, if I could just chime in too, a little bit along the lines of what David said is, you will notice throughout this presentation and our presentations in the past, the PCTPA has always taken the lead on this project with Kathleen and David's excellent help and our consultant team with Mark Thomas and Zach Saviglia and his staff. We do this because it's important for us to ensure that our priorities are always taken care of. And so that has come at great expense. We have certainly in this case, we were able to get a solutions for congested core, not solutions, a Caltrans Sustainable Communities grant to fund our staff time and our consultant time. But above and beyond, as you'll see in the OWP, we had to commit resources and staff time to get this done. And we do that because it's important, because this brings money back into Placer County. As we move forward, and you work with our new executive director, Matt Click, we're going to have to make key decisions on whether we retain that leadership role. My recommendation as I depart would be that we always stay involved in this, if not the leader, very close to being the leader, because as we know, when we are involved, we get it done. And we ensure that our priorities are at the top of the heap. So,
Okay, board members, do you have questions?
I do, Madam Chair. With the $75 million funding request, will that fully fund the Capital Corridor first phase?
The Capital Corridor share of that $75 million is $25 million, and that was identified as part of a presentation to the Capital Corridor Board several months ago as part of an overall funding plan to make that project whole. So that $25 million. Plus, there will be there is a grant application going to the federal government under the CRISI program. It's a Consolidated Rail Infrastructure program, and I think that is due in December here, and that's a grant application seeking $65 million. So those two grant applications, this $25 million plus the one to the federal government for $65 million, will complete the funding plan for the third track project.
So the $315 million for total project costs include the Sacramento Valley Station and the bridge improvements, and a portion of that is Phase 1 third track.
Correct. So that $315 million, is a consolidated number for those three.
Thanks. That was my confusion. I just wanted to make sure that that 315 wasn't all to get us to the 2 additional trains out of Roseville to Sacramento. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay. No raised hand, no comments by the public. Okay,
Madam.
so we're being asked to adopt resolution number 22. Do we need to do these separately?
No, you can adopt them as one action. Staff moves the recommended action as printed in the staff report.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, I'm looking forward to being on that 2026 second train out of Roseville, so I will move this action.
I will second the motion.
Okay, so
I'll second the motion. Oh,
we've got Broadway seconded. Thank you, though.
no problem.
Amara,
Yes.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Clark Kretz, Holmes, Howdeshell,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes?
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, moving on to item L. Amendment number 1, fiscal year 2022-23 overall work program and budget, OWP. So Jody LaCrosse presenting. Thank you.
Good morning, Board. Jody Lacoste, Fiscal Administrative Officer. I'm presenting to you today the Amendment 1 of the overall work program and budget. Let me get the slide going. As you know, the budget is a fluid document, and this amendment contains known changes that have occurred since the final budget adoption in May. This amendment is a collaborative effort from all PCTPA staff, and we are pleased to present to you a balanced budget. It has also been reviewed by the TAC and Caltrans local assistants. And additionally, I'll talk about a little later in the slide, is we are also directing additional funds to the contingency reserve to assist with cash flow. Now, a look at our revenues and where our funding is received. There are various sources. I found it interesting. It's very evenly distributed between state, federal, local, and other funds in this budget. Of the $8.3 million in revenue, over 60% of this is received on a reimbursable basis, which goes back to that reserve comment. Cash availability is necessary, as the majority of these funds are received on a reimbursable basis, meaning we have to expend the funds first before we receive the revenue. And then a look at our expenditures. 93% of it is directed towards our work elements, and the remaining is going towards the operating cost for PCTPA. And then another quick look at it broken down by work element. You can see the largest one right now is the State Route 49 sidewalk gap closure, as that project is ramping up. And to now go over the changes that have occurred in this budget amendment, staffing and benefits have been adjusted to reflect staff cost after the hiring of the senior planner replacement, as well as a short overlap in the executive director position. And additionally, hours have been adjusted by work element to reflect workflow or workload. Direct costs have been adjusted. We included funds, expenditures for the executive director recruitment. State Route 49 gap closure has increased to adjust for the Safe Routes to School program that is part of that work element. Right-of-way utility capital and cost related to advertising, awarding, and administering the contracts. And this revenue was adjusted accordingly and is 100% reimbursed by either CMAQ, ATP, HIP fund, and HIP funding sources. Work element 46, which is our mobility action plan that David just presented on, has been adjusted to reflect the actual carryover of the Sustainable Communities Grant, as well as the consultant cost for the remainder of this project. Work element 61, which is the funding strategy, has had carryover of the jurisdiction contributions added into it, and those funds will be used to increase outreach activities. And Sparta has been adjusted to reflect updated consultant fees for on-call modeling and fee assistance. And lastly, our contingency has been increased by $394,000, which now slightly exceeds the 15% reserve minimum to assist with cash flow while we are waiting reimbursements. And unless you have any questions, staff recommends approval.
Okay, board members, questions?
No questions, just comments.
Okay, we're ready for your comments.
Really heartened to see the reserve in there, because that's an important thing with any, for the sustainability of any agency, so. And good work in documenting all this, and we remain at 7 full-time equivalent staff folks, so, thanks.
Okay, can we open it up to any public comments or questions? Okay, then,
Move the item.
all righty.
I'll second the
I'll
motion.
second. Amara.
Okay, we're gonna let Amar, we'll let Amar have the second. Great.
Amara,
Yes.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Clark Kretz, Holmes,
Yes.
Howdeshelt,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes,
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
okay, great, thank you. So moving on to number M, consideration of agreement with Meraki Public Affairs for funding strategy outreach services. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Directors. Just maybe a final comment on the prior item. That was, we have transitioned the preparation of the OWP to our fiscal administrative officer. That's a planned movement to make sure that our accounting is and budget are connected and better facilitated through our agency. So Jody did a great job. This is kind of our first time without the training wheels on, if you will. It is a group effort, but it's led by Jody, and she did a great job. And also Solvi does a wonderful job as well as at compiling this into one nice-looking document. So,
Thank you both.
so moving on to the next item, we wanted to take the opportunity to kind of give an update on our transportation sales tax measure effort, our funding outreach, as well as highlight a change in contractors for the outreach effort itself with the firm of Meraki Public Affairs. So kind of looking back, where we were here last on this effort was we did our final poll in April of 2022. At that time, we had a lot of things going on in the county and in the world that were at top of mind, other than traffic and congestion, and those being things that you're all familiar with: inflation, gas prices, the Ukraine conflict, etc. And traffic congestion was still a key issue, but it dropped from its number 1 through 5 down to number 8 or number 9. However, as I mentioned, it still is a key issue of folks, thinking that traffic is going to get worse over time, especially with the growth that's happening in Placer County. And just a little breakdown by jurisdiction. Again, folks feeling that traffic will definitely be getting worse in the future with return to work and with our community rapidly growing. We did, when you read the measure, we did hit the 2/3. That's the highest we've been in some time, at 67%. We do simulate an election, and certainly as has always been in the years past, dating back to 2013, when we simulate an election. And what that is when there is a funded opposition to it, and we read a number of negative issues, that drops. That is, again, something we've always found. It's something we need to shore up so it doesn't drop as much, and probably also led to that decision to defer until 2024. And as you can see here, we're trying to get back to that 2/3. We need to be well above that 2/3 for staff to recommend to the board to move forward with an election. And our hope is that by June of 2024, we'll be in a position to recommend that we move forward into that transportation sales tax measure to solve the significant deficit in transportation funding we have here in Placer County and to provide those local funds. And again, here's the a little bit more data, when we simulate that election again. It's been the same answer throughout our history of working on this measure, albeit the drop was a little more than we would like. We've always seen a drop, even when we got to the Measure M back in 2016. So one of the things that we encountered here in the recent past was that our long-term outreach firm, FSB Public Affairs, due to some issues with the firm in Southern California, that firm no longer exists, and we had to move in a different direction in order to provide consultant assistance for our outreach strategy. And so we circulated an RFP widely in Northern California. There's only so many firms that actually specialize in this, and we got 3 proposals back for that. We formed a selection committee made up of the City of Roseville, the Building and Industry Association of Northern California, and members of our stakeholder group, and also PCTPA staff. We did also extend the invitation to a couple other jurisdictions. However, everyone is very busy right now, and certainly they were not able to provide us staff for that. But we had a good core group that took a look at those proposals and unanimously recommended Meraki Public Affairs as the preferred vendor. Meraki Public Affairs includes members of the prior FSB team, including Cherry Spriggs and Aldo Panesci. And we're recommending today that you move forward with that firm to guide us in that outreach effort. So a little bit about what we've been doing in the outreach effort. Certainly we've been doing our normal things, which include producing videos and distributing those out into the south part of the county, to focus on the need, whether it be a need due to traffic congestion itself or emergency response. We've been doing lots of things, pushing out the message, whether it be through the Galleria kiosk, through stakeholders' testimonials, or Rocket TV or some other community meetings. We had a number of community meetings, last year in different areas to discuss transportation. We find that these kind of grassroots meetings where we're able to explain a very complicated transportation funding formula and why we need this, given everything that's occurred, is very vital to that, and we plan to continue that effort. Of late, we've been doing a number of things, including utilization of Rocket TV at many public events here in the south part of the county, utilizing their mobile billboard at things like Roseville's Family Fest, at the concert in the square in Roseville, at the Lincoln Air Show, and a number of other venues, as well as staffing community events like Rockland Park Pulse, a fun event at Johnson Springview Park in the city of Rockland, or at Lincoln Showcase. And so we've been doing a bit of work here of late to continue that outreach. And then again, as we move forward, one of the things that we found in our research and the difference in the work plan that you approved last year is that we need to be, instead of having, if you will, a surge of activity, and then polling and then adjusting our message and then having a surge of activity, we have found that a more consistent approach is warranted. So consistently being out in the community day in and day out, and having these grassroots community meetings are vitally important. In our work plan, which you approved, For the outreach, we have 36 community meetings through June of 2023. And you see on the screen here some of the first set of these that are going to be happening at the end of this month and the early part of next month out in the community, whether it be Sun City, Lincoln Hills, the eastern part of Rockland, the western part of Roseville. And at these events, we, if you will, encourage people to attend through the provision of food or drink and drink meaning soft drinks, not anything else, but entice them to come and have a conversation with us about traffic congestion and transportation funding, so that we can dispel a lot of the myths that are out there in the public on the gas tax or what other funding sources we have and why those are not used for transportation funding, kind of what our limitations are. And as we have found in the past, a lot of folks come away from those meetings with a realization that there is a deficit in transportation funding in the county that needs to be solved. So with that, again, staff will move the recommended action, which is to authorize the executive director to sign a master agreement and letter of task agreement with Meraki Public Affairs. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Board members, questions?
Just a comment. I'm glad that we're not doing the surge approach anymore, because there are a lot of questions out in the community, and getting those in real time and helping a sustained educational process is critically important. I would recommend hot chocolate and candy canes for the December meeting. So
we will be out at the tree lighting ceremony at the city of Roseville and some other communities with that exact approach. I also failed to mention that Cherry Spriggs with Meraki Public Affairs is actually here in the audience if you have any questions of her.
Okay, questions? No?
No, it's good.
How about the public? Would the public like to chime in?
Madam Chair, I will therefore move approval.
Okay.
Amara,
Yes.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Clark Kretz, Holmes,
Yes.
Howdeshelt,
yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to N, Executive Director's Report.
Just a few things to mention this morning. One is we just received word from the state of California on their funding program for the statewide ATP or alternative modes funding program. As you know, we have a statewide approach or statewide round, and then we have a local round through SACOG. Unfortunately, some of our key projects that we submitted, including the Dry Creek Greenway and the Rockland Road Interchange and other projects, were not funded, so we did not receive any funding for ATP projects here in the county. And so we're going to be working with our partners who submitted those applications to kind of find out, why our point totals were lower than expected, and try to regroup and resubmit those for the next funding round, which would be through SACOG for smaller requests, or next year for larger requests. We're also going to be talking to Commissioner Davis, our CTC commissioner, to seek his input as well as to how we can improve the ability to get our ATP projects funded. But unfortunately, this year we did not get any of those funded through the statewide program. Wanted to also mention that we are working on a project which we haven't probably told you a lot about, but we're just kind of starting some interaction with our partners in Yuba County on the Wheatland Expressway. That's where the town of Wheatland and the county area to the north surrounding the Toyota Amphitheater and the Hard Rock Casino. They're looking at a bypass, if you will, similar to the Lincoln bypass. It's a very large, long-term project, but it would connect into Placer County at a certain point, yet to be determined. So we're working very closely with Yuba County, the city of Wheatland, and their consultant team on that project, and we'll be bringing forward to you updates on that on a regular basis. I would mention with that project, we've been working hard to get the Highway 65 corridor included in the ITIP program, the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program. It's a key funding program for roadways and roadway improvements, and we haven't had a whole lot of luck as yet, but we're hopeful in working with our partners up in Yuba County and connections to things like the Beale Air Force Base. In the future, we'll be able to convince Caltrans to include us in that ITIP document by looking at it as a corridor approach, whether it be for roadway improvements or electric vehicle charging or whatever improvements. A corridor approach is, as you've seen with the Sacramento Gateway Plan, is usually an approach that has better luck in getting things funded than a single county. Wanted to also talk about a little bit more about what James Corliss was saying in his presentation. We, with our SACOG representatives, are going to embark upon a re-examination of the 6-county funding program, and that relates to the Sacramento County sales tax measure, which is on this November's ballot. Director Joyner, who's on our board here, is going to be the representative from Placer County on that relook at the funding round. We have to be very, very careful to ensure that our funding stays intact in that approach. And as James pointed out, we have some very difficult hurdles with changes at the Federal Highway Administration with how that money is processed through our region. And we worked really hard, especially with the efforts of Rick Carter, to navigate that. But now we have another twist to that that's come in with a re-examination of the funding round, and Director Broadway's analysis with the 6 houses is very accurate, that we need to protect our house from the other 5 houses. Let's see, last couple things. One is, as mentioned in a couple items here, the Placer Business Alliance trip. We have a number of directors attending that trip. There's going to be a transportation panel as part of that effort, and led by Director Broadway, and my presentation as part of that, and my participation as part of that. But we've also, through our OWP efforts, we're also able to have our new executive director also attend the PBA trip. And so that week of November 14th, Matt and I will both be back there with directors Howdeschelt and Broadway, and I'm not sure, Director Jones, if you're attending that too.
Going to board.
And Director Holmes, so we have a significant portion of our board back there. So, and it's really important, and it especially with, as David mentioned, the Chrissy grant that is the final key part of the third track project. Timing could not be better to be back there to talk about that project. Last thing I'll mention is before that trip, I'm actually going to be out of the office. I'm taking an opportunity to visit my son in Amsterdam, and so I'll be taking the next couple weeks off before the PBA, and then going directly to the PBA trip. And so Rick will be acting in my capacity as the acting executive director while both Matt and I are out. So. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on anything I spoke about or any other direction you wish of staff.
Great. Sounds exciting. Got any room in your suitcase to Amsterdam? Any other comments, questions? Anyone online? No? Okay. All righty. Then any board directions to the staff? No. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mike. I look forward to seeing you in DC. Okay, then no board direction, and information items are listed for anybody that would like to see that. And I guess our next meeting is December 7th. Ooh, Pearl Harbor Day, right? You know, I think I might not be able to be here on December 7th. I think I've got some commitment. But at any rate, we can talk about that later. Anything else for the good order? Okay, well, this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you so much.